Well, welcome. Go ahead, have a seat. My name is Marc, and I get to be one of the pastors here, and it's good to have our summer kickoff today. Big welcome to everybody who's online, on demand, and on mission with us. It's good to be together in whatever form that might take. If you're new here, we want to make sure we get a chance to welcome you. There's a Connect table in the back. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But if you've been around with us somewhere around last November, last December, you might remember seeing a little blue brochure that looked like this. And what we wanted to do is just make sure that everybody was sort of on the same page as far as how we felt that we wanted to grow in the coming year. What were our priorities? And I just want to give you a little bit of an update on that and let you know how we're doing. All right, so we laid out 4 specific things we want to do. We want to continue to focus on outreach and figuring out how we can serve well in the community. And we're going to have a little interview later. It's going to talk about a couple of those things. We wanted to start saving towards a long-term home, and we're close to about $10,000 since Christmas that we've kind of been able to save up. We also want to be building ourselves into a self-sustaining church. We are a church plant. We're a new church, and in many ways, though it's been 5 years, in some ways it's only a year really since we relaunched after the pandemic. It feels like we've been here a while, but it also feels very new and young. And if you're here and you don't know many people around here, well, that's just true of new churches. You're not alone. We are still building ourselves into a church. We're still getting to know one another. So it's a great time to be starting out with a church. And part of self-sustaining was we needed to build up our leadership base. And that's something we've done. We have many more leaders than we did certainly a year ago and certainly 6 months ago. We're continuing to get the right people in place to make serving one another and serving this community, make it go well and make it effective, right? And a part of self-sustaining is funding our church. And we've added new givers, and other givers are giving more, and that's going to be important for us to take important next steps. But those are numbers 2, 3, and 4 as far as our priorities. The number one priority, though, for us this year was to really establish next generation ministry as part of the heartbeat of what we do as a church. I genuinely believe to the core of my being, the number one priorities of any church is to develop and disciple the next generation coming up in the church and the next generation coming into the church from the outside. These are the things that enable the church to go from one generation to the next, from one culture to the next. That's what people have done for us. Why we have a church is because people gave it to the next generation, and that is number one priority for us. And so we've been building our team and adding members to our team for months now, and that's gone really well. This summer, though, we're going to take 2 very important steps in 2 very specific ways. And so for the last year, Next Gen Ministry has been under my oversight and leadership, and in many ways it's kind of suffered there because I only have so much time, and generally speaking, on a Sunday morning I am here and not neither upstairs, downstairs, able to check on things. We've built up a great team of volunteers, but we want to take the next step as far as developing that all the way from birth all the way into young adulthood. And so Rachel Short, who has been overseeing adult ministry, and I are going to be switching. I'm going to take adult ministry. That was where I cut my teeth for 15 years. And Rachel's going to be taking her developmental talents to develop our next generation ministry. She's not going to be the youth pastor. She's not going to be a children's director. More importantly, she's going to mobilize our body to do those things. We'd like to build ourselves up to be able to have that kind of leadership staff. before too long, and hopefully sooner rather than later. But the most important thing that needs to happen in the life of our church is we need sort of that executive leadership to mobilize so that everybody in our church recognizes they're a part of the next gen team. To be a Christian is to be a part of helping the next generation get the faith. To be a Christian is to be a family member to younger people. And so everybody in this room is a part of next gen ministry as far as I'm concerned. I also think everybody in this room is part of our connections team. If you are a Christian, if you are a part of the church, it's everyone's responsibility to invest in the next generation coming into the faith and the next generation coming into the faith. These are fundamental priorities. And so Rachel's going to be leading out on that and developing those ministries. And it's been a very short time, and there's been a tremendous amount of progress already. You'll be able to hear more about that because we're going to get a chance to hear from her and hear some of her experience in that area and what God has put on her heart. But the other specific thing we have done is we have brought on 3 summer interns this summer. They are part-time interns, in many ways very part-time interns, but I want to introduce you to these 3. Emma Kedziora, who's been working with our kids ministry most of 2023. She's also a Westchester student and a senior there, and is on staff part-time with Young Life as well. In the middle in that photo, you have Dora Hionis, who is a Penn State rising sophomore, and she's our events planning intern. She's running the whole summer kickoff for us today. And the other one on the right, that amazing-looking kid, Hannah Lucenius, who is our preschool intern and is helping organize our preschool ministry and she's also a Penn State kid, is going to get all the curriculum set up and ready for us and for our volunteers to run through the end of the year. Anyway, and Rachel in particular is going to be doing a leadership residency with each of them through this summer. So at the heart of what we want to do is we want to be sending out workers. We want to be developing the next generation to step into leadership within the church. So we should be very excited about that, and more details to come. All right, so that's your little update on how these things are going. I want to get us, though, into our message. Just one other thing. When it comes to Rachel's responsibility, she'll still continue to participate on the teaching team. Same executive responsibility she has had with me along the way, just switching areas of oversight. All right, let's get into our message today. And if you would stand, we're going to go ahead and read Philippians chapter 4, just a short passage, verses 10 through 13. All right? So we'll bring up on the screen and we could read it together. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. All right, thanks. Go ahead and have a seat. The NFL schedule came out a few weeks ago, and there's always this sort of thing like, what games are you circling on the schedule, right? And the Eagles have like the worst schedule, like the hardest schedule. They say the hardest schedule the NFL has ever devised for anyone, right? And they've circled one particular game. Can you imagine what game that might be? A rematch with the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, it has to be in Kansas City after a bye week. That's going to be a tough deal for us. Anyway, there's always that sort of conversation like, what games are you circling? Well, preachers do that thing as well. And our pastors do this when we lay out a series and certain passages and certain topics are going to be covered at certain times. And what they do is they circle it like, I don't know how this one is going to go, or this one may be a tough one. That's this Sunday. This Sunday, we're in the middle of a series called The Secret. How to struggle well. We've been going through the book of Philippians, or the letter to the Philippians, a letter from the Apostle Paul to a church centered in the town of Philippi in the Roman world. And we're in chapter 4, and in many ways it's the most practical chapter. And in the middle of this, he says, look, I've learned the secret. Anytime someone says they've learned a secret to something, you need to pay attention. The difficult thing, though, is he says he's learned the secret to being content. And which means that we need to talk about contentment. We need to talk about contentment today. And I've got two problems with that. The first problem is that there's like something deeply ingrained in who I am that has the kind of logic that says the only thing better than an ice cream cone with 2 scoops is an ice cream cone with 3 scoops. All right? And I sort of apply that in just about every aspect of my life. I just want a little bit more. If there's a good thing, the only thing better than a good thing is more of a good thing, right? And I sort of I kind of think about that in every aspect, right? Why be content with 2 scoops when you can have 3, right? And I think about that in every way, much to the chagrin of my doctor, right? And that doesn't always work. So that's my first problem today. The second problem is that, well, we're in America. And who, thinks the word content is like cool? Like, who wants to be, content, right? It's like, content? Aren't you paying attention? Are you just content with this? Are you content with who you are, right? We're in America. We weren't content to live under British rule. We weren't content to just have a portion of North America. We're not content to just have an average economy. We're not content with Hitler taking over Europe. We're not content to just look on the moon. How about we walk on it, right? We're not content to have The Voice. We're not content to have Dancing with the Stars. We need to have things like The Masked Singer. Someone needs to explain to me The Masked Singer. If there's somebody watching that somewhere on the planet, I don't understand it, right? Or understand why they think they can advertise that to NFL fans and think that they're going to watch it. Anyway, we're not content to have Survivor, right? We need to have the Real Housewives of Unionville, all right? That's not a show. It's not yet. And you're probably thinking, I actually have some storylines I could add to that, right? But we might end up with the Real Housewives of Unionville, right? Because we're in America. Why be content with this when you can add to it? And so when Paul says, I've learned the secret to being content, sort of the American in me is just like, well, why would I want that, right? Contentment is like, look, I got that last year on the 6th day of my vacation. It took me 5 days to stop working, and then I had a fight with a family member that was been waiting for 6 months, and after that, I felt content. In fact, I took photos of my feet in front of the water, and I posted on social media. That was a really good day, and then I went back to work, right? Contentment is like day 6 on the vacation, and then we go back to the grind, and hopefully we might be able to get to day 6 of the vacation 365 days later. My suggestion is we resist it and we kind of push back on it and we don't like it because we just don't know what it is. And I think it's what most of us are really searching for, what most of us are really grinding for. And it's what we're looking for in our escapes. It's what we're looking for in our frustrations. So what I'll do is I'm going to ask 3 questions. What is contentment? What are the enemies of contentment? And then, what really is the secret of it? All right? So let's just start with the first question. What is contentment? And because I've had this date circled for a while, I've been reading books, and I've been just kind of looking at it because in many ways, it's sort of like the spiritual struggle of my life, just kind of working this thing out. And I've been thinking about it. And here's the definition I put together for us. Contentment is the art of enjoying the life and calling that has been given to you. The art of enjoying the life and calling that has been given to you. And Paul speaks of contentment with some real credibility. If we can go back to the passage, the scenario going on is Paul has received a financial gift from the Macedonians. And he's like, this was awesome. He says, I rejoiced greatly when I got the gift because he, at the time, is in prison in Rome. Paul's been through a lot of stuff, and he's been in like the dungeon and torture prisons before. This isn't dungeon and torture prison that he's in, but he's in house arrest. And when you're in house arrest, you can't make money, you can't go to the grocery store, you can't like do stuff. And so what you need is you need people to do things for you. You need other people to buy things for you because you don't have anything. It's not like you're in an awesome house. You're like in a first century house. First century houses are designed so people would leave those houses. They're not very good, right? And so you go other places to enjoy your life. Well, he's stuck there, and he doesn't have any resources. But Philippi, and some scholars say maybe some of the other towns in the churches in the towns in an area known as Macedonia, which is a relatively poor part of the Roman Empire. They put together some funds and they made a really nice, generous gift to Paul. And he's like, Paul says, this is great, but I want you to know something. Though I needed the money, I really needed the money, I wasn't needy for it. And in saying it, what he wanted to make sure is that he wanted to make sure that like his well-being wasn't based upon whether they gave to him or not. So he says big thanks, and then he makes a very, very clear statement afterwards. He says this. He says, you need to know something. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. He says, really, thank you for the gift. It's huge. But just, you need to know something. It's not about the money. I mean, it's really nice to have the money, but like, what means most to me is that you're thinking about me. It means a lot that you had renewed your concern for me. He had need, but he wasn't needy. He knows what it's like to be well-fed. He knows what it's like to be hungry. He knows what it's like to have plenty. He knows what it is to have want. Paul grew up in a pretty wealthy area. He grew up in what's known as Tarsus, and he was a Roman citizen. And Roman citizens usually have some kind of bank, and they're doing pretty well. And he was well-educated. He did really quite well. So he knew what it was like to have plenty, and he knew what it meant to have loss. He knew what it meant to be hungry, which meant that the amount of money he had meant that he needed to space out his meals so he didn't run out of food at some point in time. And we sort of read past that, but I mean, think about it. I don't know what it's like for you, but if I haven't had breakfast right around 11 o'clock, I become like an awful person. If somebody wants to give me a Snickers because I can't, it's like, don't leave Marc alone with real decisions if he hasn't had breakfast, right? And Paul says, you know what, I know what it is to be hungry. The truth is, that kind of hunger, I don't know. And he's learned to be okay. He's learned to be content. He's learned to enjoy the life and calling that has been given to him. And I keep coming back to this word, enjoy. Throughout the book of Philippians, Paul says 9 or 10 times he used the word joy or rejoice because he's trying to help them understand the power and the importance of enjoyment. And if you don't kind of believe me that this is a biblical thing, The largest sort of community of like Protestant scholars got together in the 17th century, produced this epic thing called the Westminster Confession of Faith. And in the Westminster Confession of Faith, they said, the whole duty of man is this: to enjoy God and glorify him forever. Enjoyment. I'm not so sure that's a great American word. Production feels good, achievement feels good, ambition feels good, and none of those things are opposed to contentment. Paul was quite an ambitious man. He was going to reach the world for Christ, right? So he had lots of ambition, but somehow he was able to be both ambitious and content. Now, enjoyment for some folks, it's kind of easy. It's the glorifying God thing. It's like, oh, do I have to do that too? But for others, like I said, I just think for some folks, we just assume life is moving from one responsibility to another. And if we allow ourselves to escape the perpetual responsibility, something's wrong. Paul says it's your job to enjoy. Our world struggles to enjoy. We assume that enjoyment has to, we need money to enjoy something, or we need a red Solo cup to enjoy something. But people are like, aren't you paying attention? There's lots of brokenness in this world. Yeah. For others, they would say, well, my recovery friends would use the term uniqueitis. Uniqueitis is that, like, I understand how what it's supposed to be like for everyone else, but like, I'm different. Like, the situations are different for me. Like, everybody else can enjoy the life that is given to them, but you don't understand the situation I am in. But even to you, God says you can be content. You can enjoy the life and calling that he has given you. Anytime somebody makes an emphatic statement or like a black and white statement, one of the ways I challenge that statement, or anytime I'm thinking about a black and white statement, I think, is this true for everybody in the world? Would this be true for every single culture? Would this be true for every single person? Is contentment available to every single person in the world? And it's just kind of good to think through life through every single person. I have a graphic that took the world's population and a whole bunch of statistics and reduced it all down into 100 people. It's just, there's 7 trillion people in the world or whatever, 7 billion people in the world, I forget, the 7 trillion, whatever the number is. You reduce that, let's just say you reduced all those statistics down to 100 people. What would that group of people be like? This specific chart is, okay, if you took all the world's Christians, it's like somewhere or close to 3 trillion or billion or whatever, and you just reduced it to 100, what would that room of people look like? It says if 100 Christians represented all of global Christianity, 67 of them would live in Africa, Asia, Latin America, or Oceania, while 33 would live in Europe or North America. Most would be found in urban areas as opposed to rural. They didn't even mention suburbia. That's a global exception. Linguistically, 16 would speak Spanish as their mother tongue, 10 would speak English, 8 Portuguese, 5 Russian, and 3 Mandarin Chinese. Most, 64, would be between the ages of 15 to 64, while 26 of them would be under 15. 11 Christians would be illiterate, and 35 would have little to no access to secondary education. Roughly half of Christians would have access to the internet. The other half would not. 14 would have no access to safe water, and 5 of them would have malaria. Most Christians, 79 of them, would live in countries with moderate to high corruption. Okay, now, I don't care what your cable news station guy says. This is not a country with high corruption. We're talking fascists and civil war. That's just what you do, right? A typical Christian today is a non-white woman living in the global south with lower than average levels of societal safety and proper health care. And they can be content. They can enjoy the life and calling that has been given to them. They can. And so can we. In some ways, thinking about enjoying the life and the calling that has been given to us, I've used this illustration before. It's like receiving a gift. If God has created you, he's given you this gift of life. When someone gives you a Christmas gift, how do you honor that gift more than anything else? You enjoy the gift. You share it. You don't try to pay for the gift. You don't try to return the gift. The best thing you can do to enjoy a gift, to honor a gift, is to enjoy it. And at best, share it. The word contentment doesn't feel particularly American, but if you turn the opposite of it and say, well, how does discontent feel? How would you like to be described as a discontent person? Kind of feels a little ugly, right? But let's get to that. That's point 2. What's the enemy of our contentment? I'm going to give you an outside of us part and an inside part of us. All right. Let's just talk about the consumerism of the world we live in. We live our world is just naturally consumeristic, and I don't want us to be particularly judgy about it. Consumerism isn't all wrong. It's really nice to get your packages within 2 days, or if you spend enough money, you get it overnight. That's a good deal, and it produces a lot of jobs. It produces income, which helps feed people, and it's a good thing. Customer service is a good thing. It teaches people empathy, teaches people to pay attention to others and not themselves. There's a lot of right things about consumerism. And to oppose it in our Western world is like to oppose air, right? It's like everything about our world is very consumeristic. But I want to just kind of lay out a quote for us that's just kind of that an author wrote about consumerism and just kind of how deeply it affects us all the time. Consumerism sees the consumption of ever more products and services as a positive thing. It encourages people to treat themselves, spoil themselves, and even kill themselves slowly by overconsumption. Frugality is a disease to be cured. Consumerism has worked very, very hard with the help of popular psychology, just do it type stuff, to convince people that indulgence is good for you, whereas frugality is self-oppression. Because make no mistake, consumerism is a religion. Our temples, our malls, and digital storefronts, our altars are checkout counters and online baskets. Our priests are advertising agencies. Our sacrifices are the dollars in our checking accounts. And our God is our unmet desire. What happens with consumerism is that we are made, and what's normal is that our role in this world is to make money, spend money, and consume stuff and experiences. And we can just spend our entire life on that little treadmill. And it's just really important. It's not true. Your life doesn't consist of consuming things or spending money. And making money isn't your highest end and goal. It's important that we don't run off judging this because we just live in it. But it's important to know it and see it so we can, as much as possible, step out of its flow and not let it direct the affairs of our life. Our contentment and our satisfaction in life isn't based upon consuming the next thing or doing the next thing. I say that because we just need to be humble about its power over us. And not just our power of us as individuals, but the power of how it shapes our churches. Alan Hirsch, an author, says this about how it's affected the church. He says, whether we choose it or not, almost all expressions of church in the West are implicitly vulnerable to non-discipleship, professionalized ministry, spiritual passivity, and consumerism. The problem is rooted in the profoundly non-missional systems of the system itself of church, of the way church is oftentimes conceived. He says, instead of the church becoming a place where the people of God are equipped for works of service, showing up to church becomes an end unto itself. Instead of becoming a launch pad into the world, Christianity becomes a belief system that insulates us from the world. It's really important that we don't be judgy about something that has deeply shaped us. We just need to learn it so we can step out of it, to allow it to not just become our assumptions. We put the number 938 in our name because it described a picture of how Jesus envisioned the church. That Jesus envisioned the church to be a sent group of people, sent to one another to offer love and care, sent into this world to offer hope and human solutions for human problems. It's not something to be consumed. It's something to be enjoyed and shared. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give. And the difficulty about consumerism is it activates something that lies inside of each of us. You know the word entitlement? Not a great word. Nobody likes that, but entitlement is a posture of discontent. Am I getting what I'm worth? And if we're always consuming and we're always taking our money and making sure we're getting what we deserve for our money, it puts us in this constant posture of evaluating everything else and everyone, whether it's worth our time, whether it's worth our money. I've just made a short list of things that entitlement does in my own heart and mind, different kinds of ways of thinking that it shapes the way we can think. Entitlement makes us think things like this, like I shouldn't have to suffer. Entitlement tells me that I should expect the government to always agree with me. I should expect the scriptures to validate every one of my feelings and all of my ideologies, and if they don't, I don't have to believe in them. Entitlement suggests that I shouldn't have to grieve. Entitlement suggests that my career should always be up and to the right. Entitlement suggests that I should always be self-actualizing, that I can be a loving and caring person without having to sacrifice or be uncomfortable. Entitlement says my money is my own. Entitlement says that delayed gratification is sort of like a grandparent thing, right? And that the economy should always be working to my advantage or I should be outraged. That I can have the spiritual fruits of love and joy and peace without exercising any spiritual disciplines. Entitlement says I'm not accountable to anybody. Entitlement says my life is validated by my bucket list, and that my life is validated by increasing career accomplishments. Entitlement says my spouse should always be smoking hot, always happy, and never disappointed in anything. Entitlement says that I should always be healthy. Entitlement says my life should consist of an increasing amount of freedom and authority. Entitlement says that I have no responsibility for the 99% of the world that has been born with less than me. Entitlement says that I need to take care of all of my own needs first, and then if I have anything left over, I can maybe offer some of that to others. Entitlement says I'm the one who decides what I really need. Entitlement says if it feels disagreeable to me in any way, it must be wrong. It's easy to find myself in a lot of those statements. Not philosophically. It just kind of trickles in. It kind of trickles in. Or leaks out, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, is that what was going on behind that? Now, the temptation of something like this is to sort of make a list of all of our bad habits and our bad attitudes and just start knocking them off. I'm just going to fix these things one at a time. But I want to offer you something very, very different and suggest that that's not how God changes lives. It's not at all how God changes lives and gives us contentment. Which leads to the third question, which is this. Well, if that's not how God changes lives, what is the secret to contentment? If he doesn't change lives to that next self-help book, well, how does he change? Because I should probably change to be a little more content, right? Paul says this. He says, I've learned a secret to being content. And what is that content? He says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And when we started the series, I quoted Evander Holyfield, who had that verse right across his back when he went out and beat the snot out of Lennox Lewis to become the heavyweight champ. And what did he say afterwards? I can do all things through him who gives me strength, right? And then the next time he wore the same thing on the back of his robe and just got the snot beat out of him by the next guy. I forget that guy's name. I think that might have been Lennox Lewis. The first time he beat Mike Tyson, and then Lennox Lewis beat him up. And so I guess for him, maybe God doesn't give him the strength to do all things. Or, sometimes both quarterbacks in the Super Bowl quote that verse. And what I'm going to say is that they should quote those verses. And if you're an athlete, you should quote that verse because it is true that God can give you, that you can do all things through him who gives you strength. That verse doesn't mean less than that. That verse means more than that. You can experience contentment through him. Anytime you're united to somebody, when you get yoked up with somebody, their mood shapes your mood. Their character shapes your character. When you yoke yourself up with a physical therapist, they're a disciplinarian, and their discipline helps your lack of discipline, right? You get hooked up with somebody who's having a really, really bad day, and they're in a really, really bad mood. They will invariably do their best to give you a bad day and give you a bad mood as well. When you have united yourself to Jesus, you need to understand that you've united yourself to the most content person in the universe. Jesus is supremely content. Unbelievably content. Jesus is enjoying the life and calling that has been given to him more than anyone else. And you're like, wait a second, isn't he paying attention? Does not he see what's wrong in this world? Oh, he sees it all. Does he not see what's wrong with each of us? Oh, he sees it all. Does Jesus have any ambitions for this world? Oh, he does. And he has ambitions for you. He is supremely content, and hear this, he's content with you. Yeah, he's content with you and me, our bad habits, our sinful thoughts, the powder from the donut on our shirt. He's content. He is content. He has a very, very clear plan for this world. And it's going really well. Your perspective on it you might not be feeling it, and you might not be in line with his plan for this world, but make no mistake, his plan is going very well. He's very much in charge. He is tremendously content. Your bad attitude isn't bringing him down. Your bad mood isn't tanking his. He can handle himself just fine. Paul will regularly talk about being in Christ And what he wants you to do is to basically, the way we become content isn't by working harder at it, is by placing ourselves in him. We allow ourselves to enter into who he is. We become content not by working harder, by connecting ourselves to him and his contentment. Is he going to leave you the way you are? Absolutely not. Does he get you for who you are now? Absolutely. Does he love you for who you are? Absolutely. Is he going to leave you the way you are? Absolutely not. Is he content with the process? Yeah. He's doing just fine, and you can be as well. The Christian way for transformation is that we find ourselves in Christ. We find ourselves in his love and we become more loving. We find ourselves in his joy and we enjoy more. We find ourselves in his mission and we understand our purpose. We find ourselves in his peace and we begin extending peace, right? We find ourselves in him and we want to serve more. The Son of Man came to serve. We find ourselves in him and we want to give more. Why? The Son of Man came to serve and to give. And we're looking for ways to give. And we find ourselves in him and we find ourselves surrendering our entitlements. We begin extending forgiveness. Why? Because he's forgiving. We renounce our resentments. We release our regrets. We recognize it's not about the money. It's not even about our moments. It's not our money. It's not even our moments. We recognize that everything we've been given and has been given to us. And when we recognize that every single thing connected to us has been fundamentally given to us, we receive it. We enjoy it. When we recognize that Jesus himself has been given to us, we learn to enjoy him and glorify him forever. Can you? Can you surrender the entitlements, release the regrets, renounce the resentments? Can you find yourself in his contentment? Allow his love to give you love. Allow his joy to enable you to enjoy. Allow his peace to extend itself through you in forgiveness and in mercy and in hope. Can you do that? Will you do that?